We'll go ahead and get started. Kathy and Hillary will be doing a lot of a chat today because, as everybody saw, I am on my phone today doing that work-life volunteer thing with balancing a little work and life this morning. Thank you for coming. This is the fourth in our series of Building a Better Nonprofit. We have already covered governance, organizational basics, and last week you had the Kathy and Lois show about fund development. This week we're going to launch into, now that you have your mission and now that you've developed funds and stuff, reaching your clients or reaching your donors. How are you going to do that? How do you best do that? And that's all about marketing and PR and getting your message out there. Again, some housekeeping stuff for today. We will, use the chat for sure. Keep yourself on mute. We'll be monitoring the chat, answering questions, or gathering them at the end for Chris to answer, or his guest. He actually has a guest today for you guys. Then, as usual, if this is one of your first times in here, come Monday at the latest, Chris will put this in a nice package that includes the video, the chat, any resources and stuff, and he will send it to you after the fact. And stuff on Monday for you to be able to. So if you can't keep up in note keeping, it will be there. So I'm going to turn this over to Chris Reynes, who's with us at the foundation. He's been with us for a long time, but really in this last year and a half, he has moved hardcore into marketing and PR for the foundation, and therefore really honing those skills as far as everything from website development to social media conversations to press. So Chris is going to lead us through this one today, but again, please feel free to share resources. That's why we're all here to learn from Chris and to learn from each other. So Chris, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Avis, and thank you everybody else for being here today. I am not muted, am I? You all can hear me, right?
You're good.
All right, perfect. Let me just navigate to, there we go. So welcome to Building a Better Nonprofit, class number 4. Communication and public relations. I need to get this to advance. There we go. So the goals of this class today are going to be understanding the importance of good communication to your various audiences, including how to identify and engage with those audiences. What are they looking at? What platforms do they engage with? And how to keep their attention in a fast-paced world. Learning to develop consistency within your messaging using branding across all platforms and communication methods. We'll also dive into developing good branding for those of you that are in the very early stages of development of your nonprofit. I know most of you probably aren't, so hopefully there'll be some tips that'll help the more established nonprofits as well. Additionally, we're going to talk about leveraging your impact within your messaging, why it's important, and who should be the focus. I'll help you understand the best practices when developing your presence on various platforms, including and especially your website. We'll also discuss pitfalls to avoid, as well as ways to get the most mileage out of the content you create for your audiences. We'll also hear from a special guest today, Rob Galloway with the Tahoe Tribune, about tips and tricks with how to engage with your local media, including tips about how to get your story out there and your press releases published. Finally, we will also talk about how to utilize all of the tools at your disposal, including some examples of some tools that you can utilize to create great content, extend your reach, all without breaking your budget. So let's get into the types of communication that we're going to be talking about today. So first, I want to make the distinction between internal and external communication. Good internal communication is incredibly important, but it's not really the focus of the class today. Briefly though, good internal communication starts at the top, needs to be clear, detailed, and specific. Internal communication that is vague and open to interpretation at best wastes the time of those who you communicate with as they seek clarification, and at worst will generate undesired results. Now, I mention this because the same principles apply to your external communication as well, but in a less measurable way. Because externally, those who you communicate poorly with are less likely to seek clarification and more likely to just simply disengage with you altogether. Now, good external communication has the same qualities that I just mentioned, being clear, detailed, and specific. But there's some key things that you want to aim for with external audiences. Number one, engaging communication. Always be thinking about how you can get your audience to want to interact with your messaging. Sometimes this will be a call to action or a link back to your website or a request for comments, discussion, feedback. There's lots of different ways to make your message more engaging. Give your audience a reason not to just throw away your mailer or scroll right past your social media post. Good external communication should also be meaningful. This goes back to what I said a moment ago. Give your audience a reason to read your content. Sending out a holiday card, for instance, is great. Sending something like that to your donors. But make sure that you include an impactful story about how their donations made a difference in the life of one of your clients. Give them a reason to give your card more than just a cursory glance before throwing it away. It'll leave a more lasting impression in their memory. Always be thinking about ways to make your messaging and your content meaningful. Impactful storytelling is one of the best methods to do this. Finally, patting yourself on the back in your external communication is definitely okay when appropriate, but you should not always be the focus. This might seem counterintuitive, maybe not. Maybe some of you know this already. But beyond a brief reiteration of your mission and or program, the focus should be on your audience. What did they achieve through you? Make your success their success. Those you impact are the focus. Make your donors the heroes that made it possible. Always remember that. Now, the third type of communication I want to talk about, again, not really the focus of this class, is cross-agency and cross-organization communication. But I mention it because of how critical and important it is. This type of communication leads to collaboration, and collaboration of our efforts as a nonprofit community, both with other nonprofits that may serve similar needs, as well as with local government agencies, local county government agencies, only benefits those that we serve. Viewing each other as competitors and refusing to form these relationships through good cross-organization and cross-agency communication does nothing but hurt our mission to serve the community. I know we're all passionate about the roles that we fill within the community. We wouldn't be in the nonprofit sector if this wasn't the case. This type of communication is critical to relationship building within community in a collaborative space. If we were all in a room together in person right now, I'd tell you all to look around and identify another organization that you might be willing to collaborate with in the future, somebody else that serves a similar community, a similar subset of the community as you do, and make it your 2022 New Year's resolution to reach out to them. In fact, do that anyway, whether we're in a room in person or not. Just take a look, scroll through the attendees today and find somebody that you want to reach out to and say, hey, let's see if we can put our heads together for something. That actually brings me to my first poll. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. Please share with the poll. Does your organization collaborate with other organizations or government agencies that serve similar community needs? Yes, we do. No, we don't. Or not yet, but now we definitely will. And if anybody says no, I'd like you to share in chat why. If you say not yet, but you definitely will, that's fine. That just means it hasn't been something you've considered. But if you do say no, and we don't have any no's yet, so a lot of yeses, which is fantastic. I love to see that. Something I'm also curious about is, do you, and this isn't part of the poll, but do you collaborate with organizations on the Western Slope as well, or just organizations up in South Lake Tahoe? That's something I'd be curious to know. So if you have any experience with that, maybe share that in the chat. We'll go ahead and stop sharing this poll. There's not a lot for you to look at here. We did have one no, though. I would, like I said, love to see in the chat who the no was and what your reason for not doing so. Yesterday, we had an organization who said no, and they said that, so they're a national organization, and they're on a national level, they were advised not to collaborate. But I think the distinction that we made there was that organization was advised not to collaborate in terms of fundraising. and that I think can be understood. But in terms of volunteer sharing and idea and resource sharing, just to help serve similar clientele, that's something you definitely should all be looking at. It looks like most of you are, so that's fantastic. Now let's talk about your audiences. Now, in reference to this picture here, your audiences might not be as big of an army as this one is, but if you feed them content that is meaningful, impactful, and pertinent to them and their lives, you'll find them cheering for you just as hard, wishing for your success and buying into your mission. So let's identify our different audiences. First of all, your donors. For most of you, this is the bread and butter of your funding development. You want to find ways to effectively connect with them. And we'll talk about that on a general level, but what resonates with each of your different donors is going to be somewhat dependent on what your focus is organizationally and what your mission is. But there is definitely a constant that all donors, no matter what type, want to see. They want to see results. They want to know that their donations are meaningful, and that means articulating your impact back to them. Always be looking for impact stories that you can share with them. Feed them data in bite-sized amounts, both to help them digest a small amount of data at a time, but also to help them understand their impact and make them feel their importance. The second audience subset is your clients. Who do you serve? What service do you provide them? Ultimately, again, like with your donors, this subset is far too varied to give really specific examples. And in some cases, like with animals and the environment, this subset might require a little bit of creativity on your part to articulate just who they are and how to reach them. This communication will look very different than communication to your donors. This is where you articulate your programs and the benefit that they'll have to the community members in need of your services. The third subset is really everybody. It's the community as a whole. This includes existing donors, existing clients, as well as potential future donors and future clients, but it includes everyone else as well. This audience is a good target for your generalized who you are and what you do mass communications. But how do you target an audience that doesn't necessarily know you exist? General advertising and pushing your message out there might reach a few people, but they can be reached over time in a much more critical and impactful way through your actions and the good PR that comes with it. The community is always watching, and your engagement will absolutely build the community's understanding of who you are and what you do. This is something that can't really be forced, but it's as easy as saying yes and showing up where you're needed. An example of this in action, the El Dorado Community Foundation might be a household name within the nonprofit community within El Dorado County, at least I sure hope we are. But the vast majority of the community really didn't know we existed until the events over the last couple of years really thrust us into the forefront of community. Between the small business grants with COVID relief funding to our immediate response to financial need as a result of the Caldor fire, the El Dorado Community Foundation is much more widely known within the community these days. I will caution you though, step up, but don't get ahead of your skis. Knowing your capacity and your limits is important because while your successes will stick in the community's mind, so will your failures. You want to build credibility as an organization within the community's mind, and failures will stick with you longer than your successes will. Unfortunately, but that's the reality of it. So now let's talk about branding, building your brand and your overall message. We all know that a strong brand is important, but why is it important? A strong brand will help you stand out and it'll build recognition within the public space. Good nonprofit branding helps you stand out and helps you get your message across. Branding can help your organization become memorable, increasing your visibility and generating support from your supporters. Beyond that, strong nonprofit branding can drive your long-term strategic goals, increase public trust, and increase awareness about your cause and the work that you do. Your branding is your logo, your website, your mission, your publications, how you present yourself across all the different spaces that you occupy. Consistency and cohesion within your branding across all the spaces you occupy is critical to building the public's recognition of who you are and what you do. So how do you build that strong branding? It really depends on where you are within this process. Some of you, probably most of you, are pretty well-established nonprofit organizations who already have strong brand recognition within the community. But for those of you that may still be in the development process, and I know some of you are definitely in that process, and Compass Youth comes to mind, and you're trying to develop a strong brand identity and wondering where to begin, I've got some good tips for you that hopefully will also be something that will allow the established nonprofits to reflect on and maybe strengthen their branding as well. So number one, first and foremost, take a look at your organizational mission and who your audience is. What can you pull out of your mission that will resonate with the people that you're trying to reach? It can definitely be a good idea to reach out to your donors, volunteers, and board members and get their input as well. Review your goals and any organizational strategy documents you might have as well to build into this. Now, when building your brand, knowing exactly who you're trying to reach is critical. This way you can tailor your communication to meet their needs. So a good exercise, and you want to get very specific with this exercise, is to write out the interests, the lifestyle, motivations of your target audience. This will help you in all aspects of your brand building process, and it'll also positively impact other areas of your nonprofit's work. This kind of introspection into what you do and what your focus is and who your audience is can help focus you organizationally. Number two, consistency is absolutely imperative. Maintaining consistency in your color schemes, your logo placement, your logo usage, your font, and the language you use are critical. Keep this consistency on your website, your social media, your infographics, newsletters, brochures, flyers, emails, everything, all of your correspondence. It's also very important to have a branded donation page linked from your website as opposed to just a generic checkout page so that your donor knows that they're still interacting with you when they're actually getting out their credit card and sending you money. In addition, keep your branding and logo consistent across all channels that you occupy. It's also important to keep your messaging consistent. So there's almost no such thing as repeating your mission too many times. This is especially the case if you're running an awareness or a fundraising campaign. Consistency is what creates easy recognition and fosters loyalty and trust with your audience. Every interaction you have, online and offline with your donors, board members, volunteers, partners, anyone else in the community is an opportunity to build these relationships and strengthen your brand. To help with this consistency, I really recommend creating a simple nonprofit branding guide that outlines your main design elements, the typography you want to use, the logo and logo usage, and all other elements of your brand. Make sure the guide includes rules for what's allowed and what isn't when it comes to using those elements online and offline. A good example of this is you could make it clear that your logo is not to be stretched out or used against specific backgrounds or specific colors. Now, even if you have a strong established brand, I would really recommend going through a review of your current print and digital content. If your branding isn't cohesive, plan to make adjustments so that it is. This is something I'm always cognizant of with the Eldorado Community Foundation's branding. I'm always making sure that our branding stays consistent across all of the spaces that we occupy. Third, having an impressive logo is a very important part of your branding, as your logo becomes the centerpiece of your brand. Now, it's usually the thing that people remember the most and recognize you by. It's what creates that association with your brand. Think the golden arches, McDonald's logo. Now, designing a great logo isn't easy. A great logo will be simple but compelling, moving but relatable, memorable, and communicating who you are all in one. Before designing your logo, take some time to reflect on your nonprofit's mission and vision, and perhaps even summarize your goals in a couple of words. This will help you brainstorm colors, symbols, images, and words that best represent your organization. When designing your logo, don't make it too overwhelming. I see this a lot. People try to do too much with their logos. Don't fall into that trap. Using white and negative space to create a balance of elements can be a very good idea. And if you do choose to use typography for your logo, be careful when you're selecting the font. Don't make it hard to read, and remember to stay consistent with your font. Another trick, using storytelling as a tool. Successful nonprofit branding both convinces the head and touches the heart. So to convince the head, you need to use numbers. Make sure your nonprofit is transparent, clear, and communicative with your supporters and your donors. Share frequently about your impact. Answer your supporters' questions in a timely manner. Demonstrate how donations are spent. Use facts, data, and impact measurement to show your donors and your supporters why and how your organization is moving the needle and doing good within the community. So that's the head. What about the heart? Numbers and facts matter, but you also need to touch the hearts of your audience. And storytelling is one of the most powerful and impactful ways to do this. It can help you build meaningful relationships with your audience. It can create trust and credibility, and it can help your organization stand out. Some good general storytelling tips that I've got are: tell authentic stories. It's incredibly easy for audiences to differentiate between a sales pitch and a genuine story. So don't fall into the trap of making a sales pitch. Don't forget about visual storytelling, especially video. Incorporating images is great, but video is one of the most effective mediums to relay messages and touch the heart. Always have a central character to your story. This can be a beneficiary of your organization, or someone whose life you've changed. It's much easier for people to relate to an individual than to a large group of people or an abstract concept. And finally, don't forget about community outreach. Community outreach is invaluable in building your brand. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is to show up. This goes back to what I said earlier about reaching the community and getting that good PR for showing up, being there, doing the good within the community. Now, it's been tough to do this the last couple of years with everything going virtual. But as we hopefully start to get back to some normalcy, remember that your physical presence in the community can be one of the biggest drivers of building the trust and confidence of the community in your brand. So this takes us to our next poll. Let me go ahead and launch that. Now that you've heard all about branding, how would you rate your organization's branding? Are you pretty much Google and even newborns know who you are? Or maybe your brand is just pretty strong, but and a household name for the most part. Or maybe it could use some work, but it's not in the worst shape. Or maybe it's definitely something that needs improvement. I'm expecting to see probably nobody in that Google realm. Maybe one of you might, if you're a national nonprofit as well, but probably for the most part, you're going to fall into the middle, which was definitely the case yesterday. We do have a Google. I'd love for you to share in chat. Who's the Google? Who thinks their brand is Google? And then there is one that is, what's a brand? So definitely you've got some work to do. Now, this isn't something to feel bad about. If you're a brand new nonprofit in this space, it looks like we've probably got responses from everybody. So I'll go ahead and close that and share the results with you. If you're a brand new nonprofit in the nonprofit space or within the community, you're not going to have much brand recognition from the public. Nobody's going to know who you are. So it's okay to be starting out at the bottom. Everybody's brand starts out at the bottom. That is, consistent across everybody in every in every space, not just the nonprofit space. So don't feel bad. You'll get there. Just work towards building that brand and that trust within the community. So we're going to move on now to the different types of communication. We're going to cover the whole gamut here. Some of them are certainly more important in today's world than others. Printed communication, in a lot of ways, is one of the least important as we move into a more digital world. But there are still a lot of people in older generations that they want to still get that postcard. Printed communication can serve you well as professionally printed flyers or rack cards that are available at your office or at events to help people better understand what it is you do, who you serve, and how they can get involved and help. We're all aware of environmental concerns these days, so try to avoid waste with your printed materials. Don't include information on them that will quickly become dated or that will lose relevance after a short period of time. In order to get the most out of this material, you're likely going to be printing it in bulk, and I do recommend professionally printed material. That's going to give you a lot more mileage and a lot more credibility and a lot more professionalism than a homebrew, but it is going to cost a little bit more money. So because of that, you really want to make sure anything you print is going to stay relevant long enough for you to distribute all of it. Printed material is also something you can utilize in mailers to your donor database. Things like event announcements, save the dates, and of course that dirty word solicitations are common uses of printed material. However, a word of caution with solicitations: make sure that it's more than just an ask. Use the opportunity for that storytelling I was just talking about. Inform the recipient about your organization, your mission, and most importantly, your impact. It's a great opportunity to communicate back to your donors what their generous donations have accomplished. So don't waste it. Email communication is getting more and more common these days, and more people prefer to get emails over mail in their mailbox. There's a lot of junk mail people get, and you definitely don't want your mail to be associated with junk mail. There's a lot of junk email as well. But it's generally used for more informal correspondence, but it can be a great way to send out reminders of upcoming events, digital newsletters, save the dates, things of that nature. But the important thing for this is to make sure that you're always collecting emails for your donor database whenever possible. Good digital communication relies on building that robust contact database. So always find a way to ask for an email. Large email blasts like newsletters can utilize resources like Constant Contact or MailChimp, but do be careful when using something like that. It can be a double-edged sword. While they can help your content look more professional, they can also make it look more like spam. So both email servers and your audiences might reject them. We did get a good tip in yesterday's chat to utilize something like Constant Contact to create the content, email it to yourself, and then send it out from your personal email as a more professional looking email. That way you're avoiding the mass bulk email coming from something like Constant Contact, which email servers might filter out. Now moving on to social media, the necessary evil, right? Whether we like it or not, social media is an absolutely essential tool for communication and messaging in today's age. Most people engage with one or another social media platform every single day. So how do you capitalize on that interaction? What platforms serve what purposes for the nonprofit community? What platforms should you even be looking at? There's a ton of them out there. We're going to focus today on the big six: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. But that's only 5. I did say 6. We'll get to number 6 in a minute, but first I want to focus on the more traditional social media platforms and what their best uses are for the nonprofit sector. Of the traditional social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram are easily the ones that you should be focused on if you're only going to pick a couple. Facebook comes in at over 70% of most demographics in the US using it to some degree. Now that number really only falls off after the 65 plus age range, and then it only falls to about 50%. When it comes to the younger demographics, the 18 to 29 and the 30 to 49 demographics, Instagram has a 50 to 70% usage. So you definitely want to be engaged with these two platforms at the very least. And the nice thing too about these two platforms, at least for now, until the FTC decides to force Meta to sell Instagram, which I do think is coming, and we may lose this functionality if that happens, is you can cross-post using the same content scheduler to Facebook and Instagram. Do be aware that they do have somewhat different spaces. Instagram is very photo-centric, so you want to make sure that anything you're posting to Facebook and cross-posting to Instagram is relevant to Instagram as well. The best uses for these two platforms are frequent content posts, updating the community on what's going on, announcing events, programs, successes, celebrating donors, things like that. These are your bread and butter platforms. Because of the high usage rates of these platforms, they're also good candidates for fundraising campaigns, and both have built-in fundraising mechanisms that you can utilize. So coming in at number 3, depending on where you find your data, some say Twitter, some say LinkedIn. They're very close in terms of usage across the demographics. But Twitter, I found to be most commonly the number 3. Twitter can be used as more of a direct line of communication with the people who are interested in your cause. Think of it as a method for an active dialogue with your followers, more so than something you schedule content for. The best use for Twitter is that direct dialogue with your following, sharing ideas or relevant, time-sensitive, and important news with your following. LinkedIn is primarily going to be used for networking from a nonprofit standpoint. You can use this for information sharing and collaboration with other nonprofits that have intersecting missions. Remember that collaboration I was talking about? LinkedIn is a good way to get information shared between different nonprofits. The best uses for LinkedIn, networking with other like-minded nonprofits. This can be a great way to idea share. Treat LinkedIn like a think tank, especially in situations like we've been in for these past couple of years where everybody is scrambling to find new and innovative ways to fundraise without gathering in person. Now, if you're really trying to capture that 18 to 29-year-old demographic, TikTok is the fastest growing social media platform in that age range. So if that is your target, or if that is a demographic that your nonprofit focuses on in terms of your client base, TikTok is going to be the way you're going to reach them. The best use for TikTok, as I just said, accessing the Generation Z and spreading your message to them. This could be particularly beneficial for organizations like Boys and Girls Club and Big Brother, Big Sister. Organizations that have a youth focus are going to get a lot more mileage out of TikTok than those that have, say, for instance, a focus on seniors. So that's the 5 traditional social media platforms. What about that 6th one you mentioned? So what if I told you there was a social media platform that could reach over 80% of the US population, including people that don't use or don't like social media at all? YouTube is that platform. In an increasingly digital world, video is everywhere, and most people don't consider YouTube to be a social media platform, even though it is. And that really works to YouTube's advantage. Consider starting to put video content out there, even if it's just in the form of YouTube Shorts. which, if you don't know what YouTube Shorts are, it's basically YouTube's version of TikTok, but with the benefit of not being TikTok. YouTube is a platform that nobody thinks twice about using, and you should definitely have a presence there. So the best use for TikTok, again, it's an ideal platform for storytelling, because video storytelling is so much more impactful than just written storytelling. It hits more of the senses at once. It's also a way to be more engaging with the viewer. They're going to be more likely to watch a video all the way through than read a long article. They're also going to be a lot more compelled to share the video with others if it touches them on an emotional level. And video is much better at touching people on an emotional level. So some general social media tips. Keep it short. Most social media platforms have a character limit. And those that don't, you definitely don't want to just ramble on a long story on a Facebook post, for instance. Very few people are going to read that. So use it as an opportunity to link back to your website. Give a short teaser of the story on the social media post, drawing them in and getting them to click the link back to your website. This has the added benefit of giving them the opportunity to maybe dig into your website further and learn more about who you are and what you do. Second, leverage all of your other forms of communication to promote your social media. Getting as many followers as you can is key for pretty much any social media platform. So ways to do this, you could include QR codes linking back to your social media pages on your printed material. And you could also include social media links on your email signatures. This way, every single email you send has a chance of getting a new follower or a new subscriber. But the key to all of this is to make sure that the content you're putting out there on any of the platforms is meaningful. Nobody wants their social media feed to be filled with nonsense. Trust me, there's enough nonsense out there on everybody's social media already. Don't make your content more of it. So that brings me to the next poll, which I'm sure you can guess is going to be on social media. So go ahead and take a minute to share all of the different social media platforms that you all use. This is a multiple choice, so you can select all that apply. Not seeing any TikToks. Not surprising. We did have several TikToks, though, on the Western Slope, about 5 of them, I think, on the Western Slope yesterday. I'm seeing 100% usage of Facebook, which is, again, not a surprise. I expect to see Facebook and Instagram as the highest. Looks like at least one of you doesn't use Facebook. I'm thinking we've got pretty much everybody having responded now. I'll go ahead and, you guys are quick. I like that. Go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So as you can see, it's pretty much what I expected, and it is very accurate to the amount of demographics. With the exception of YouTube, it's accurate to the demographics that I found in my research on who's using what platforms. The vast majority using Facebook, with Instagram coming in at number 2, and Twitter and LinkedIn right there neck and neck, right at 30%. YouTube again is low on the east slope, just as it was on the west slope. So that's a little surprising, but definitely something that all of you could probably look to start to utilize and help build out your brand through video content. So now we're going to talk about your websites. More than virtually anything, your website is your public face. In today's world, it's going to be one of the first things that someone learning about your organization will see. Because of this, it's imperative that your website be professional, intuitive, easy to navigate, and comprehensive. Your website should be able to answer all of the frequently asked questions that someone might have upon first learning of your existence. Who you are. What are you all about? Where can you be found? How can they contact you? And most importantly, why should they care? You generally have less than 1 minute to convince someone visiting your website for the first time to stay and learn more. This means you need to make your homepage or whatever landing page you have from anything that you link back to your website from. You have to make sure that that's going to grab the visitor's attention. This is usually going to be done through compelling imagery, followed by meaningful and impactful language. You want your visitor to want to learn more. Also, an intuitive and easy to navigate menu is a critical component of a good website. If you have trouble finding something on your own website, someone else definitely will too. A good idea is to send out your website to board members, committee members, other people that are involved with your nonprofit, but not necessarily involved in the website building component of it. And ask them to navigate through your website and try and find various things. If any of them come back with, I've got problems finding this, this, and this, you might want to consider trying to make it a little more intuitive for visitors of your website so that they can find things a little bit easier. Another critical component of websites is to ensure that they're responsive. What this means is that the website will automatically detect the kind of device that it's being viewed on and adapt its appearance accordingly, giving a consistent experience across all devices, whether they be mobile devices, tablets, or desktops. Most modern-day website builders are inherently responsive and will do all of this for you, but it is still important to ensure that your website does work properly across multiple devices by testing it. I have found that even though most website builders are responsive, there still are some things that don't quite convey correctly across platforms, or across different devices. So testing is critical. Similarly, it is important that your website work properly and give a similar experience across all major web browsers. Now, there's a ton of different browsers out there, but the vast majority of them are hardly used at all within the US. So the ones you really want to be focused on are going to be Chrome, Safari, Microsoft Edge, and Firefox. Opera to a lesser extent, but Opera is pretty minimally used. So you could avoid that one if you had to. Now, to keep you from having to download a whole bunch of different browsers to test your website on all of these different browsers, there are free online tools that will emulate different browsers for you so that you can test compatibility, load speeds, and get error reports, things like that. I do recommend one. I recommend Comparium for this as a tool, and I can send out the link to their website. It's a free and comprehensive and easy to use emulation tool for browsers. It's all web-based. You don't have to download anything, and it does a very good job of doing this for you. It does also even have a feature that can test device responsiveness for you, but I have found that testing device responsiveness on an actual device, so you're building your website on your browser, you log in on your cell phone and test it there, will give you better and more accurate results than things that are emulating devices. But browser emulation is pretty consistent, so you don't need to worry too much about downloading all the different browsers. So after your home page, typically the most visited page on most non-e-commerce websites is going to be your Contact Us page. So I want to spend just a minute here talking about the importance of having everything available on your Contact Us page. All methods of contact are important, and none of them should be left out. Having an email, even if it's just an info at your domain, is critical. I know a lot of organizations may not want to have a contact email because they also use that email as their personal email. They're a smaller organization. Consider getting an info at your domain, or even just a your organization name at Gmail can be a good idea, so that you have a dedicated email for your nonprofit organization and you can have it listed on your website. It's the most common means of communication for those visiting your website. So an email available is critical. Now, I have seen a lot of websites will replace the email altogether with a contact form. Contact forms are okay, but a lot of people don't like them. They view them as impersonal. It's important to have both. I wouldn't recommend replacing a contact form with an email or an email with a contact form. Have both. You want to give them lots of options. Different people prefer to communicate in different ways. And some people are old-fashioned. They want to pick up the phone. So make sure you've got a contact phone number for your nonprofit listed on your website, on your Contact Us page. Even if that phone number just goes to a voicemail and tells them that you'll get back to them, that's fine. If you do this, though, make sure that the message you have on your voicemail clearly and professionally states your organization and that they need to leave their contact information for a callback. Make sure you don't make it sound like it's an individual's personal voicemail or leave it as just an unset up voicemail with that robotic auto attendant. Chances are they're just going to hang up and they won't even leave a message. Having multiple forms of contact helps add legitimacy and credibility to your organization. For example, not having a physical address listed will make your organization feel more nebulous. People want to know that you have a location. It helps build trust. Now, I understand not every organization has a physical location. So if you don't, what can you do? Well, this goes back to transparency. Simply giving just a short one-sentence explanation saying that you currently don't have a physical office space, so you don't have a physical address. Maybe you have a P.O. box, and that's why you have a P.O. box listed. That can go a long way in helping just build that trust, being communicative with visitors to your website. So that's Contact Us. How else can you add credibility through your website? First and foremost, as I just mentioned, transparency is imperative, especially for nonprofits, because you're executing your mission through the use of donor funds. This makes displaying things like your audited financials, 990s, annual reports, critical to building that trust and credibility and legitimacy with potential donors learning about you through your website. This should be on an easy to locate page where all of this is listed. This is the reason I included this cute little kitten meme in this slide. Many of you serve very noble causes. Hell, you all serve noble causes. You're all nonprofits. Children, animals, the environment, they're all good causes that people should trust. But that isn't enough. You need to establish that credibility through the transparency of these important documents, financial documents listed. Second, having pictures and bios of your organization's staff and your board of directors helps humanize your organization and helps visitors to your site know who they're dealing with. Displaying your board of directors can be especially important, as oftentimes these are known members of the community that come with credibility of their own. For someone interested in your organization, seeing someone they know from the community, either in person or by reputation, sitting on your board of directors will increase the likelihood of that person interacting with your organization in some positive way. Maybe they'll donate. Maybe they'll show interest in volunteering, or even maybe sitting on a committee or on your board. Or maybe they'll just simply bring up your organization with someone else in a conversation. All of these interactions are positive outcomes that can make it more likely, that will be more likely, rather, if they feel some kind of personal connection to your organization. And seeing someone they recognize will help establish that personal connection. Next, make sure that your nonprofit tax ID number is prominently displayed. Most websites actually have a footer section that appears at the bottom of every single page. And this is a great place to put your tax ID number, because no matter what page they're visiting, it's going to be plainly visible at the bottom in that footer section. This is something that potential donors are going to want to see. They want to know if donations to your organization is going to net them any kind of tax benefit. Accreditations are another thing that you want to have prominently displayed if you have them. A common location for something like this could be at the bottom of your homepage. That might be where somebody would intuitively look for something like that. And generally, accreditations are going to have some kind of a seal or a symbol that come with them, and that would be what you generally would want to display in that section, showing that you're accredited in whatever field. Now, a donation button is definitely an important thing to have displayed, but be very careful about using pop-ups to display your donation button. I've visited nonprofit websites before where every single new page I went to, I got a brand new pop-up saying, donate now, donate now, donate now. And it gets very tiresome. And I can tell you probably donating now was not something I was looking to do after seeing that. The final thing that you can do, at least in the scope of this class, to build credibility in your online space on your website, and this is going to be the most technical I'm going to get, and hopefully I don't get too technical with this in this beginner class, but an SSL certificate should be something you have for your website. Now, what an SSL certificate does, essentially, in a nutshell, is it gives you that padlock next to your website's URL and says HTTPS instead of saying HTTP. Okay, think of it like the SSL certificate is sealing the envelope with the check in it before you put it in the mail. If you don't seal it and you send it through the mail, somebody can reach in there and grab that check and pull it out and get all the information from it. But if it's sealed, nobody's going to open it except the recipient. So SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer, and it's the standard technology for keeping an internet connection secure and safeguarding any sensitive data that's being sent between two systems, preventing bad actors from reading and modifying any information being transferred, opening that envelope and pulling out the check. The SSL certificate creates a foundation of trust by establishing a secure, encrypted connection between client and server. Now, SSL certificates are something that you can acquire for your website if your website doesn't have one already through your website hosting service. That's how they're acquired and installed. There's a small cost associated with them. Sometimes some website hosting services offer them for free, some don't. But it's definitely something you need to inquire with if you don't have one for your website already. So what can happen if you don't have an SSL certificate for your website? You can have misuse of data. All the confidential information that's being sent and existing within your site can be accessed by bad actors. Your website could be downranked by Google. Google's been working consistently over the years to encourage SSL encryption. In the absence of an SSL certificate, your website might be marked and flagged as insecure by Google and rated as not trustworthy, causing it to lose rank and fall further down in the search engine when people search for your nonprofit or your website. You could also have loss of trust from the community. Websites that have that HTTPS are regarded by those that know what it means as being more credible by their visitors. And the public is more aware of these kinds of security measures these days than ever, especially with your donor bases getting younger and younger, or rather the younger generations moving up into those roles of donors. They are going to know what this is, and they're going to not trust a website that doesn't have that secure padlock. This can also harm your brand reputation. If somebody were to get into your website and leak data, your security will be compromised, and that will hurt your brand image. And even if no leak like this occurs, the lack of that secure padlock will make your organization look less professional. This can also cause displays of warnings by search engines. So somebody searches for your website in Google and they'll potentially see a message warning them that their connection with this website is not private. And some browsers might even refuse to display a site that they deem as being unsafe, without that SSL certificate. So hopefully that did a good job of explaining exactly what it is and why it's important. I know it's a little on the technical side, so I apologize for that, but it is important enough that I felt it was definitely necessary to cover in this class. So now we do have a poll, and that's going to be, does your organization's website have an SSL certificate? And I did include the not sure, as some of you may not know. It's as simple though as going to your website and looking to see if that little padlock is displayed, or also looking to see if there is an HTTPS before your website, or if it's just HTTP. And then of course there's the NA for those of you that may not have a website. But I am seeing mostly yeses with only a couple of not sures. Looks like we've got pretty much everybody responded here. We'll go ahead and share. Just very briefly here, mostly yeses, which I'm glad to see. Again, a couple no websites and a couple of not sures. The not sures definitely ought to take a look and check. The NAs that don't have a website, I'm sure you're probably working on that. Definitely having a website is critical in today's day and age. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And I'm actually going to turn it over now to my guest, Rob Galloway, with the Tahoe Tribune, to share with you about nonprofit print media relations, press releases, and the like. So Rob?
Thanks, Chris, and hello, everybody. Some of you I know, or maybe exchanged communication with, others, nice to meet you. And while I'm sure many of you folks have experience in submitting press releases, my hope with this discussion really is to dive a little bit deeper into maybe the do's and the don'ts, and even go a little bit deeper into the benefits of them, because I'm sure, there's probably many of you that just dread writing them. More like just, what do I need to say? Why am I even doing this? They never run what I write anyways. Anyone have those thoughts? I'm sure you do. People that are nodding, maybe, they're not the ones who have to write them, but I kid with that. But, diving into this, if you look at the bullets, I'm not going to read the bullets, directly, but I'm just going to talk through some of these things. And, when it comes to press releases, and when I talk about that, the branding side of things, branding credibility, what do I really mean about that? And Chris, he talked about that a little bit earlier. If I relate that to a press release, if you send in releases that aren't really representative of your brand, or maybe what your brand perception is, do you lose credibility with that? There's a good chance that, yeah, you do, at least with the newsroom side of things. And if you turn that over, if you put it on the flip side, if you submit something that's extremely credible, filled with really good info and insight, does that help your brand? Absolutely, that helps your brand. And I can tell you the latter one, that's what we will deem as resources, and the former probably not so much. And if you think about how to engage, or what these are intended to do, if that submission or that press release, if it strikes a chord with readers, it can absolutely benefit your nonprofit and help you achieve success. People might read it, they might share it to their pages, and who knows, you could possibly hit the right person who's willing to make a donation or act on whatever the release covers. But it could even put that little sweet cherry on top and get you major media coverage. I mean, we're not considered major media, but markets like maybe San Francisco or Sacramento, those are definitely major media outlets. And that last bullet there, and perhaps the biggest key to all of this is really the easier that you can make it, the better your chances of getting what you hope. I can't stress that enough. I'll talk about a little bit more about how to make things easier, but that's probably the biggest. If you're going to have one takeaway there, that's probably the biggest thing, is make it easy for us on the newsroom side of things. And Chris, you can bounce to the next. There we go. So when you think about submitting or pitching content, again, going through these bullets here, you really want to make sure that item is newsworthy to a greater audience. Don't just submit something that you think is important to your nonprofit. Maybe you got new toilet paper dispensers, and that's awesome for you, but the most folks, they probably don't care about that. That's not a press release. And really pay attention to the media outlet that you're working with. And I'll give you an example. This was a PR company, an actual PR company. They sent us in a press release. We ran the press release, and they followed up. It was probably like 2 weeks later. They followed up and say, hey, just wanted to follow up and ask if you were going to run this. Having already ran that gets frustrating for us. when I say pay attention, it means pay attention to what's going on. Following up is good, but if you're submitting, just make sure that, that you're making sure that when you do submit something that you're paying attention to whether it ran or not ran. I'll give you some examples of following up too. This happens all the time. So it's very frustrating to the newsroom. We have to answer that question. We probably have to provide a link, but if you're paying attention, we don't have to do that. So less time for us. And speaking of time, really give us plenty of time to place or to act or ask questions. That general rule of thumb is going to be about 2 weeks. If you send something in, our print edition goes on a Friday. If you send something in on Wednesday, hoping to get it in for Friday, our editorial budget's already done for that print edition. We might be able to squeeze it in. We typically are already working on page building at that point. So, sometimes we can push it out on the web, but that giving us plenty of time, that's really going to be one of the big factors in there. The next two on there, they somewhat go hand in hand. If you're going to be submitting images or graphics or video, please make absolute certain that you own the rights to those. You can't simply just go and steal images from the web and submit them because it helps you tell your story. Things like images and graphics and video, they have copyright laws that protect them. So you really want to make sure that if you're sending any of those, that you own those. And if you are including those things, please scale them down, as necessary. You don't want to really clog up an inbox with, a 40 meg file. That's a huge file. It might not even make it through the server. If you can't, or you don't know how to resize a file, Dropbox, it works fine and it's free to use. So you could always provide a link to Dropbox if you wanted to just put the files in there. If you're going to be including stats or information for inside of your press release, you might be asked to cite the source. So you really need to be prepared there. You can't just simply, Google something and see an expert from a search result that cites a statistic and be good to go. What site is that? Is it credible? Where did they get that information? Things like Wikipedia, even Wikipedia is not 100% accurate. If you were to come out and have a statement and say 50% of all bears get euthanized when they get captured, something like that's a pretty bold statement. Expect to be able to back that up, or better yet, going back to making things easier, just include the source in the submission, especially if you're going to be citing things like that. I'll give you an example. We had a political submission not too long ago, and they had a very specific quote from what will be a challenging candidate come this year. We couldn't find the quote anywhere. We asked them to give us or cite the source of where they got that quote from. And what we got back? Absolutely nothing. They did not provide us with that source, so we didn't run it. Those types of things are extremely important. We want to make sure that we can be as accurate as possible when it comes to things like that. And I joked a little bit at the beginning about media maybe not running what you submitted, but also be prepared to have what you submitted be rewritten or shortened. Space in the print edition, it's somewhat of a commodity. When it comes to rewriting things, we work in what we call AP style, which means we might have to alter what's submitted to fit the style. A short example of like AP style is like time, right? If you're saying 10 a.m., it's 10 space A period M period. That's what AP style wants us to write as, not 10 a.m. altogether. So just an example there, we want to try to fit all of our submissions into that AP style. Also ensure that you have the right contact information. The editor email, that's going to be on the next slide for folks that want to make note. But feel free to get to know those local journalists and or the editor or me, even so. You can send things to them directly, and I would actually probably recommend that route as opposed to just being a general email inbox. And why? Because when you think about relationship building, fostering, developing those things, that's going to be good for both sides. It's good for you being a valued resource and potentially being included in maybe other stories down the road for increased impact for your nonprofit. If we have a story that we're covering and we have that relationship and they're like, this person would probably have pretty good insight into this news story. They might reach out to you, get a quote or two, or maybe what your feelings are on a certain situation, and that just puts your brand out there in another aspect. And if you send something in and it does run, don't be afraid to say thank you. We're all humans. Hearing, seeing that, it really helps build and foster those relationships. Chris, you can go to the last slide there. The last few items here that I wanted to touch on. or more hard details around a submission and also actually pitching a story. They are different. A press release could be a story pitch, but a story pitch is probably not a press release. If you are submitting that press release though, and you are sending it in a PDF, don't just send in the PDF. You could also push the text of it in the email, and that's how we would prefer it to be. Put email in the body, or put the text in the body of the email and attach the PDF. And why do I say that? Copying, pasting from a PDF, it can be a pain. Sometimes things don't translate. Again, it goes back to making things easier. And this doesn't happen very often, but it does still happen. Do not write by hand, please. We would have to retype all of that information. And that's not an easy thing, or a thing that we really want to do. Also, make sure that you've spell checked. If something comes into us and you have a lot of misspellings or just typos, that's one of the quickest way for us to disregard something. So really pay attention there to what you're doing. If you're looking at a story pitch, something to be considered there when you think, a story pitch is more like, maybe it's not something that you don't want to be the front runner on, or it's something that you think maybe it's part of what your nonprofit's, I won't say brand, but really maybe what you reinforce or what you hope to help solve a challenge within the community. Maybe you're not going to be that one to drive the narrative, but you think there's a story there that you're passionate behind, or you can add some things to that story. That's going to be more of probably a story pitch. And things of that, if you are pitching an actual story as opposed to submitting a press release, that's going to be us writing that story. We might get quotes from you, but any detail or information, if you are pitching the story, contacts, things like that, the more that you can provide in that instance, the more likely we are going to be there to follow through. Not just, say, hey, I think this would be a good story. And if we say, okay, so who would be the people we talk to? And you're like, I don't know, it'd just be a good story. That's making things a little bit more difficult for us on our end. If there are those details, it's going to make a compelling case for your release, maybe that aren't in the release itself. Don't be shy about including those. The better the pitch, the better the opportunity that's going to be there as far as us following through and actually creating a story out of it. A press release doesn't necessarily have to be an event. Events could be totally separate by themselves. We also have a calendar that you can submit events to. I don't have it on. Oh, it is right there. That last URL at the bottom there. Take full advantage of that too. I mean, you can send in a press release, but also go in there and you can plug your own information into the event calendar. It's available on our website at any time. And then we also reverse publish those events in print as well. And then, one of the things too, and Chris talked a lot about this as far as social media and everything, if say your press release publishes or the story publishes, whether it's on our social page or it's on our website, make absolute certain that you use that opportunity through your own feeds or through your nonprofit feeds or both to promote that. Don't let that exposure pass you by. Take every advantage that you can of that. Share it. If we have it shared on our social page, share it to your social pages. Have friends share it. Get that exposure. We reach a pretty wide audience, as far as social and our website goes. So we're going to hit a pretty big audience, but we're not going to hit the same audience that you have. So make sure that you take advantage of that. And I think with that, I sped through it pretty quick. I tend to talk quick, but I think I'm close to time, Chris.
Yeah, I think you did a great job there, Rob. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And Rob will stick around to the end here. So if anybody does have any questions for him specifically, he'll be around to answer them. But with that, I do have a poll for everyone. Have you ever had anything, stories, articles, or press releases published in the Tahoe Tribune? I'm guessing most of you are going to be a yes, but definitely curious to see. I'm seeing pretty much everybody a yes. Got a few yet that haven't responded. Give you a few more seconds here. Yeah, we're seeing, looks like only one never. And then we've got some that are just stories and articles, but not press releases. One that's press releases only and no stories, articles. We'll go ahead and end that and share with everyone here. So as you can see, just briefly, most everybody has, which is excellent. That's definitely good to see. Go ahead and stop sharing that one. And we'll move to just bring up my final poll so that it's ready to go. So now we're going to move on to developing a communication plan. So a fully fleshed out communication plan is going to incorporate all of the methods of communication that we've already mentioned. Print media, social media, press releases, email correspondence, everything. It's a good idea to start the year by brainstorming the kinds of messaging that you want to put out to the community that year. Are there particular stories you want to tell? Is there a certain theme you want to follow? Doing this early on will help you build consistency and cohesion into your messaging for that year. This kind of messaging can be especially powerful if you plan to build into it the impact your organization has had. Showing successes that you're moving the needle is critical to generating buy-in from the community. As mentioned by Avis, I believe, what was it, 2 weeks ago now, it also isn't a bad idea to develop an internal calendar for your communication as well. This way you can plan out when your communications, marketing, social media posts will happen for anything from your daily to weekly to monthly content to sending out messaging around big events, program deadlines, things of that nature. This way, everything is plotted out and structured in advance so all that you need to do when the time comes is to execute. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to develop all of the content ahead of time. And it definitely will pay to be flexible and dynamic, as sometimes world events force a change in course with our communications. COVID and more recently the Caldor fire taught us that adaptability is critical to successfully navigating a crisis. Communications are no exception to that. So another thing to always be thinking about is pictures and videos. They're critical components to sharing your message and telling your stories. Kathy mentioned even last week that they can also be an excellent addition, that videos in particular can be an excellent addition to applications, and they'll set you apart from other organizations when you're competing for those grants. So it's a good idea to compile pictures and videos all throughout the year and save them for your future messaging and anything else that you can utilize them for. It's also a good idea to be aware of things going on around you within your organization's area of focus. Sometimes something will happen within the community around a topic that you might need or want to put communication out about. As nonprofits, we're all community leaders, which means that we will be looked to for our expert take on certain things that are within our organization's wheelhouse. This might require a shift from an existing communication plan. So while developing a communication plan and a calendar are definitely important, it is equally important not to lose the ability to be dynamic and that adaptability within your communications. So that brings me to the final poll, which is, does your organization develop a communications plan each year? And does your organization use a communication calendar? A couple of mouthfuls there, and it is a two-part question, so make sure you scroll down and answer each one. And I'm guessing that they're probably going to be fairly similar to yesterday, which was, I think they are a little bit different than yesterday. I'm seeing pretty consistent across the board. I'm guessing most people that use a calendar also develop their communication plan, and vice versa. So we've all answered very quickly again. We'll go ahead and end that and share the results briefly so you can just see that yes, you're about 67 percent yes and about 37% no across the board. It's actually dead even for both questions. So that is definitely good to see. So before we wrap up here, especially for anybody here that's sitting on a communications or marketing committee, or you fill those roles for your organization, don't get comfortable. Always be looking for ways to up your game. Never stop learning, and always be on the lookout for growth opportunities within this space. Chances are anything that you might want to learn to do, be it video editing, website design, photo editing, whatever, there's going to be thousands of video tutorials out there available that will help walk you through the process on whatever your application or program of choice is. There are also tons of free open source software programs available out there that are virtually identical to most paid software you can think of within this space. So I've got a few really good examples for you for some of the things that you may want to do and may need to do within design and marketing and communication space. So GIMP is the first one, and it's a free alternative to Adobe Photoshop. It's a powerful photo editing software, and the price is just right. There, you don't have to sign up. You don't have to give them credit card information. No, nothing like that. You just download the program and use it whenever and however you want. And it is just as robust as Adobe Photoshop is. It works a little bit differently. To do certain things have to be done in a different way in GIMP than in Photoshop. So if you are used to Adobe Photoshop and just want to stop paying for it, there might be a couple things you need to relearn. And if you're learning it for the very first time, it can be a little overwhelming. But there's countless video tutorials out there on YouTube, as I mentioned, that will walk you through all of its functions. Another good resource if you're photo editing and you want to utilize some great free stock photos and videos and illustrations, vector graphics, things like that, is a website called Pixabay. It is a free online source for stock photos and videos and such, and there's no watermarks. And the best part is there's no sign up. You don't have to sign up and give them your email. You can just go on, search for what you want, royalty free, download it and utilize it. The largest sizes are limited to those that sign up, but you don't have to sign up to get very usable sized images. There are a lot of other resources out there for stock photos as well. Pixabay happens to be the one that I prefer simply because of the no sign up aspect of it. So if you're doing video editing, Blender is a free open source video editing software that's very robust in its capabilities. Really good one to utilize for video editing. Google Docs is something you can utilize to essentially replace Windows Office software. And if you combine Google Docs with Google Drive, you can easily collaborate between your communications committee members or marketing community members. Another great resource for design is Canva. Canva is a web-based program, or rather a web-based service where you can design tons of different types of things, videos, Instagram posts, mailers, really anything. Some of it is locked behind a paywall. However, nonprofits can get the paid version for free. They have to sign up and get approved by Canva, but it isn't a very difficult process to do so. And you can make some really great looking content with Canva. It can completely replace something like Microsoft Publisher or something like that. And being that it is web-based, it allows you to easily collaborate with other staff or committee members, as they can all get on and access your same designs, and you can work together in building something great. And this is just to name a few. There's tons of free open source alternatives to really virtually any paid software out there. All you have to do is search. Maybe don't go to Pirate Bay, search the more legitimate channels. And some of them are certainly better than others. so you ought to do a little bit of YouTube research to find which one might best fit your skill level and what you want to utilize it for. And then again, make sure you don't forget to utilize YouTube tutorial videos to teach you the ins and outs of using your new free software. So the last thing I've got for everybody is a little bit of exciting news, actually. So in building the marketing around this class series, we produced a podcast with the Nonprofit Podcast Network that was very well received. During the production of that, I asked them if I could offer them as a resource to all of you participating in this course. And the Nonprofit Podcast Network has offered to donate their time and production costs to any of you who would like to have your organization featured on their podcast. These are professional podcasts that are recorded at a studio in Citrus Heights, so it's a little bit of a drive for those of you in Tahoe. But I'll send out the contact information for them in case you want to reach out to them and schedule to be featured on one of their podcasts. Additionally, the Eldorado Community Foundation, some of you I'm sure know this already, we are always looking for ways to support the nonprofit community as partners. And we have a number of resources that are available on our website that are available to all of you to do different things. Again, some of you probably already know this. I know some of you have utilized this in the past. I'd like for all of you to utilize this as much as you want. You can request posts on the foundation's social media. So we'll actually put a post out on our social media, Facebook and Instagram, for you to help message to our audience, to help get your message rather to our audience as well as to yours. You can list your upcoming events on our community events calendar, much like with the Tribune. You can maintain, you all have, or should have, if you don't, you can submit to get it listed, have a profile listed on our nonprofit directory. And so if you don't have your profile listed there already, you can submit a form that will have all of your details and get your profile listed, and you can update it because periodically things change within organizations and you want to make sure that that's up to date. That is a resource that we provide to our donors who are looking for different nonprofits to want to support and looking for nonprofits in an area that they feel passionate about. And you can also list your employment and volunteer opportunities. We've got a job board on our website. So I'll send out the link to all of these resources to all of you when I send out the rest of the resources for this on Monday. Now, the latest endeavor that we have in this effort of supporting the nonprofit community comes in the form of an article series that I'm writing called Nonprofit Spotlights. Each of these articles will feature a different nonprofit organization to help bring community awareness to your organizations and update the community about what you've been up to and what you have coming up in the future. So this is something new that we're really excited about, and you'll definitely since you're all in this class, you'll definitely be ones that I'll be reaching out to in the hopefully near-ish future. Certainly I'm one man writing, so I can only get to you as fast as I can get to you, but we'll definitely be getting your stories out there. And that wraps it up for me. So questions, comments, any success stories you want to share? Rob's still around if you've got direct questions for him. Avis, is there anything in the chat that you haven't been able to cover?
No, I think Kathy and I were able to stay caught up on everything pretty well, Chris.
Awesome.
Thank you. And stuff. Gotten some feedback already. Great comment. Oh, wait, we just got one from Chris Proctor.
Yep.
Hold on.
Yeah, I see this.
I may have missed this, but can Chris comment on the importance of having a website that is scaled for mobile devices?
You did miss it. That was when I was talking about responsiveness. Yep. So what you're describing is responsiveness of a website, and all websites should be responsive. You want to make sure that your website works the same, scales properly, looks good, and functions correctly on, desktops, tablets, mobile devices like an iPhone or an Android phone. And yes, that was covered, but certainly, Chris, that is incredibly important.
Doesn't hurt to reiterate it. That is for sure. Well, I see lots of informatives, and thank you all for being here. Our board last week was just asking us, what is the charge for these classes? And you know what? We know your time is valuable and that is your charge. So we really appreciate you guys spending the last 90 minutes with us. Again, it may not be you that is on here today that is supposed to be at the next one. The next one and our last one in the series is nonprofit accounting that will be done by Sakina Madraswala, our CPA with the foundation. So if you're not the right one, make sure whoever your organization is the person to attend, get signed up and registered for next Thursday's event. Rob, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate the Tribune being there and giving the support. And Chris, great job. Thanks, everyone. And look for that package of all the material coming out no later than Monday. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.